Hi, Andrew from Sachs, and welcome to video number 6 in our 7-video sequence on leadership. This sequence of leadership is all about 3 things: well-being, productivity, and development and growth. In this particular video, we'll be talking about productivity, but with a particular emphasis on performance development. Performance development is the interaction between leaders and staff to optimize performance in respect of a couple of things. The main things we're interested in this is the what of the job, is the person doing the job, and the second is the how of the job. Now you'll see later in the video we talk about a couple of other things, but if people are getting the goals of their job achieved and they're doing it in a way that meets our corporate culture standards, then they're a good employee. Let's talk about how that might be achieved. Now, one of the first things to understand is that the most effective performance development processes are goal-based. Goals are neurologically powerful. In other words, if people have goals, they seek to achieve them almost automatically. If you've got the right employees, they will be highly motivated to achieve goals, particularly if you've been consultative and developmental in engaging them in the development of those goals. Neurologically, what's going on? The prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is where the goals become conceptual for us. I spoke in the last video about understanding outcomes of jobs and how employees are more motivated when they understand what a job is to achieve rather than what it is to do. It's the prefrontal cortex that comes to that understanding. And you'll notice that the amygdala is also involved in that. The amygdala is what causes us to get fired up about goals. It's part of what we call our limbic system, the system of emotions. Goals need a couple of characteristics to work though. First is that they must be unambiguous as possible. I mean, if you pursue a goal and you think you've reached it only to be told, well, no, you haven't, then it's a problem. Now, that doesn't mean that you have only objective goals like I build this amount of money or I created this number of widgets. You can have subjective goals, and subjective goals can be things like my leader rates the quality of this particular project that I've just completed 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 or whatever. That's a perfectly valid goal, but it does rely on communication between the leader and follower, and it also relies on requisite levels of trust. But that being said, if you have the clarity with a leader where the leader is saying, well, I think you're running at about a 6 and here's what you need to do to get to a 7 or 8, then that can be very effective, because the performance development processes that try to become too objective often fail. I mean, just think of it practically. Some of the most important things in work are subjective. Opinions, satisfaction, well, they're completely subjective. So goals tend to come in 2 categories, and we'll start off with SMART goals. SMART goals is the area of research that 2 fellows by the name of Locke and Latham spent 30 years researching. And so we understand very well how SMART goals work. Now, the SMART stands for different things in different contexts, but for the purposes of today, S will be specific, M will be measurable, A will be aligned, which means that it supports our corporate purpose, R is for realistic, and that just means that the goal can be achieved. It's not too easy and it's not too hard. And T is for trackable, and trackable is a really important one, because you can imagine if you set a goal with a staff member for 6 months, do you really want them to know that they've achieved this goal or haven't achieved that goal only at the 6-month mark? Well, of course, that's not a good goal because it's not trackable. So a trackable goal is one that's been constructed in such a way that when we're halfway through the achievement of it, we know whether we're on track or not. Good goals are trackable. Locke and Latham's research showed that good goals can cause people to change, but they need certain characteristics. First is that they should be achievable, but not easy. Locke and Latham discovered that people who had goals that are too difficult acted as though they had no goals at all. Similarly, if a goal's too easy, that doesn't affect people's performance. And that's why it's a good idea to engage the staff in the process of goal setting, to cause them to be active in setting the goal. And this is Model 3 leadership. As we've shown you in an earlier video in this sequence, this is facilitative leadership. Facilitating a conversation where we mutually agree a goal is a really good way of making sure that that goal will be committed to. The second component is that there should be no more than 7 of these. Most jobs can be defined very satisfactorily with 4 to 6 goals, 7 at an absolute maximum. If you have too many goals, Locke and Latham showed that the moment you get too many goals for a person's brain to carry them, they act like they've got no goals whatsoever. People ideally shouldn't have goals imposed on them, and this is what I mean by being facilitative about the way that goals are constructed. 4 categories of goals seem to be important, and the first of these are I would call them what goals, work outcome goals. And they're things like the volume, the quality, and the innovation of the work that's done. So they're work execution goals is another way of putting it. The second is professionalism and style goals. So they're things like approach to my job, approach to colleagues, approach to the organisation. And it's really good if an organisation has clarity about what behaviours are acceptable or unacceptable. I probably won't surprise you by saying it's good if the employees have created those behaviours in a facilitative leadership fashion, but a clarity about the outcomes that need to be delivered in terms of style, the interactions that we have to have with colleagues or staff or customers or whatever, that can be really powerful. The third category of goals is learning and development goals. So that's what are we going to learn and by when? The method that will be used to cause that learning to happen. One of the most popular things to do when people see learning and development goals is to send people on courses, and that's a good thing to do. There are times when that can be very appropriate. But in fact, 80% of the stuff that's really important to us, we learn on the job. And so alternative methods of learning, things like mentoring from somebody who's really good at something, not necessarily a leader, just a colleague who's good at something, causing buddy systems so people partner up to learn certain things. Things where people get together in a community of interest, let's say project management, just to see something out of thin air. We get together, people who are into project management get together and share in a kind of a Socratic circle sort of a sense where we're all equal. Well, what have we learned about project management this week? And that kind of thing can be a really effective learning and development process. And it means, of course, that you don't have to find budget to be able to send people on courses and those sorts of things. So it has the benefit of being highly effective, but also not really a budget impost. The final component is career development goals. Career development goals is really about where a person's going to develop and by when. I mean, is this person happy to keep doing this job all their life, or do they want to be the next chief executive or whatever? But having that as part of a development goal can be really effective from a performance development point of view. Accountability is really those four things. Developing good goals about work execution, about professionalism, about learning and development, and about career development. So those are the classical SMART goals. But there's a new set of goals that people are interested in the workplace, and they're what's called open goals. In human life, say fitness, health, those kinds of things, it's been discovered that SMART goals can on occasions be negative. So I am going to lose 0.5 kilogram by the end of this month. If I don't do it, I feel like a loser and I might give up on that venture because I've had a negative experience. The alternative is an open goal, an exploratory goal. It sounds like this. I wonder how much weight I can lose if I change my behaviors, if I change my eating patterns or my exercise patterns. Hey, I lost 0.25 kilogram. Hey, I'm a winner. I've explored that possibility. I've moved forward. Gee, I wonder what I can do next month. So it has been found in certain areas that this can be very effective. Now, the one thing we don't really know is how this kind of open goal effect works, this exploration goal effect works in the workplace. Organisations tend to love SMART goals, but it's distinctly possible that open goals, exploration goals, could be very effective in certain areas. The jury is still out on exactly what those areas might be, but you will see that kind of goal becoming more explicit in the workplace. Time will tell, but it certainly seems that from research in general life, open goals might be very effective for certain types of things. Good performance development relies heavily on goal setting, but then it relies on performance conversations. Many leaders hate performance conversations. Staff do too, because leaders, when they're not good at it, it's bad, right? You have a conversation and it tends into you've done this wrong and you've done that wrong. There is good, strong research as to what kinds of performance conversations change people's behaviours. And this is a move away from feedback to a concept called feedforward. Feedback is what you've done wrong, and on occasions what you've done right. By the way, don't give up the what you've done right, because there is evidence that if you congratulate people on performance, that will cause them to do again the things that optimize that performance. They'll like that and it will add productivity. But the alternative is, how do you redirect people? And historically it's been, well, you've done this wrong or you've done that wrong, and that causes people to feel helpless in some cases. It certainly causes them to feel defensive. And so if you think of the cocktail of emotions that the amygdala generates: anger, fear, depression. Defensiveness in employees is often a mix of those things. I don't like this, and so I'm going to try to run away from it, or I become depressed by virtue of the fact that it's about the past and I can't change the past. So the alternative is feed forward. Feed forward is where you identify an issue that needs to be remediated, or it could be an opportunity that needs to be pursued, and you avoid criticism and you focus fiercely on clarification of expectations. So the classic example, a simple one, is somebody turns up late for work. A feedback approach is, you were late for work today. What's the reason? That's feedback. Feed forward is, I expect you to be on time at work tomorrow. Your shift starts at 8:45. I will expect you to be here at 8:45. Now, you can get accidentally into a feedback conversation where the staff member says, well, what are you saying? You're saying I turned up late. I just want to emphasize, tomorrow I expect you here at 8:45. And that's feed forward. Now, you can tell it's not necessarily a gentle conversation, but there is strong research evidence that feed forward causes people to learn more quickly. And also, it tends not to be such a defensive thing. It doesn't seem to trigger that sense of helplessness, because emphasizing what happens in the future sends a message: I want you to be part of this team, but it also is much more helpful in terms of guidance. So I'll use a more complex example. Let's talk about, I'm writing a report, and my boss says to me, this is what's wrong with the report that you've written. That's feedback. And they might also say, well, this is what's good about it. A feed-forward approach might well say, well, this is what's good about this report. But a feed-forward approach might also say, look, this report, I would say it's about a 5 out of 10 right now, and it needs to be 7 out of 10 before it's ready to be sent to a customer. So let's talk about the things that will cause that report to be 7 plus or better. And so feed forward is guidance about how to improve things in the future. The reason this works is because emphasis on the past tends to trigger the activities of the part of the brain that's often called the old brain, which is the defensive part of the brain. It's the self-preservation part of the brain. Now, in addition to the idea of feed forward, there are a couple of key things here. We focus on the performance, not the person. The performance can be changed. We have to honour the person. And feed forward does focus on clarity about what's needed in future and agreeing how to get there. The final video in this sequence will be about coaching for growth. Click on the link near this video to join us for the video on coaching for growth.